right? So it's this constant tug of war of it's never enough. It never feels enough. Whatever you're doing, it doesn't feel enough. And you're supposed to work like you don't have kids and parent like you don't have work, right? And so this just feels like a lose-lose situation in so many ways.
Hello, hello. This is Samantha Saxby with another episode of Moms with Benefits. And today I am sitting here with Alexis Adams. Alexis is a full time business owner. So she has a coaching business as well as a therapy business. She is a mom of three and she is in the thick of it. So her three kids are between the ages of 2 and 5 years old. And so we're going to talk a lot about her journey into motherhood the past 5 years and some of the awesome stuff that she helps her clients with and things that she's personally learned as well. So, Alexis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Yeah, let's dive into it. So, three kids under 5 years old. That feels like a lot coming from somebody who just has one right now. So, I know for your three kids, you took a different amount of maternity leave for each child. And so, 3 months for child number one, you took a year for child number two, and then 8 weeks for child number three. So, I would love to learn more about what factors went into what you were able to take, whether that's financially, emotionally, culturally, like, because that varies across the board. I just think it's really interesting. So, if you could share with us what was going through your mind during each of those leaves and in relation to the time that you were able to take.
First, I just want to say it sounds like a lot because it is a lot. Yes, very much so. And somehow going from two to three just added a whole nother level to it all, for sure. The reason I took different levels of leave really did come down to financially. I mean, to be honest, that was the big factor in all of that is with my son in particular, I was just graduating grad school. Actually, I graduated the week before he was born. They allowed me to do some of my classes early just because he was due right around the time we would need to be in a summer class. And so I had the summer until my degree was conferred. And then I started working right around when he was 3 months, just because that's kind of how everything lined up. But we were kind of below the poverty line at that point. And so we needed the income. My husband was in grad school, and while he was receiving a stipend, it just wasn't enough to cover the bills. And so my leave was cut short in some ways because 3 months is just not enough if I had had it my way, but we needed the money. And so we jumped right into that. And honestly, I still look back on that time and wonder how we even made it work because childcare alone would have been my whole salary if we hadn't had I don't remember exactly what it was called, but basically like a stipend for childcare as well. So we were just kind of like pinching pennies and surviving in the best ways we could. And that was just with one kid.
So, talk to me a little bit more about the stipend you received and give some more color. And I know you're located in Indiana. So, did you have any time off or paid time from the state?
Yeah. So actually, we were in Minnesota at the time my son was born, because that's where I graduated from school. And we didn't have any paid time off in that state. Minnesota is really great in so many different ways because there are a lot of healthcare programs and all of that through the state, but there's no paid leave, that's for sure. And I was also, because I was still getting my full licensure as a therapist, I got a lot of the grunt work hours. I got a lot of the grunt work sort of pay, and I was kind of working my way from the bottom up. As for the childcare stipend, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was because my husband had Army experience or was in the Army for 3 years. So it was a part of, I want to say, his like VA benefits in some regards. I can't remember exactly, but I know that we had to apply for it. And a lot of it had to do with him being in school. So because he was in school, we were able to use the childcare stipend. I want to say it was through the VA, but it may have been a special program through our college as well. So that was a game changer. They pretty much covered the entire expense of childcare, which was, we wouldn't have been able to make it work otherwise. We didn't have family locally. My parents, particularly my mom, was able to come up when, my oldest was sick on occasion, but they lived an hour and a half to 2 hours away. And so that was a bit of a struggle. My husband's family all lived in South Carolina while we were in Minnesota. So really, it was just us. I'm originally from Indiana, and so all of my family was back in Indiana, other than my parents. So we were on our own, kind of surviving as best as we could. And that really forced our hand in a lot of ways for childcare when it came to taking leave and doing what we needed to do in order to make ends meet.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay, so then moving on to child number 2, you were able to take a year. So talk to me about the different dynamics at play there.
So with my second child, because the cost of childcare is so ridiculously expensive, what I would have been earning as the therapist at the level I was at, because I wasn't licensed yet, because I wasn't fully licensed, what I would have been earning would have been straight to childcare. And so it was literally just paying somebody in order to watch my kids. And so it made more sense for us to just tighten our budget a little bit and I would stay home. And actually, it ended up working out perfectly in some regards, because my second was a COVID baby. So she was born in January and the world shut down in March. With therapists in particular who were in the field during COVID, I think it was a blessing in disguise in so many ways, because I think I would have been burned out with how much I would have had to kind of compensate and make up for things, and the stress of like the childcare in and of itself trying to make that work. So it ended up being a blessing in disguise, but again, my hand was kind of forced of it's either pay somebody to be with my kids or just lose that income, but it would have evened out in the end.
Yeah, it's an interesting struggle that I think a lot of moms face is the cost of childcare. And so what do you do? And oftentimes it's the moms that are typically faced with the decision of, am I going to leave the workforce, even for a short period of time or not? And so, talk to me a little bit more about. I hear that it was a financial decision, like you did the math and it just made sense. Did you have any concerns with what it would look like to re enter the workforce? Or any concerns with kind of taking this pivot?
Absolutely. So, for me in particular, my career and my academic performance, and just I've been always a brain book smart kind of person, and that's my passion. I wanted my doctorate. I have always been kind of grind and work hard, right? And so for me to leave the workforce and to go into full time staying at home with my kids, as awesome as that was in so many ways, it also was very scary for me because it was setting me behind a year in getting my license. It was setting me behind a year in getting promotion opportunities and where I thought I would be. And honestly, it created a lot of identity shifts for me and a lot of self doubt of my worthiness, especially because I had always measured myself in productivity. I'd always measured myself in what I could produce and how much I could do. And when you're staying at home, you're doing a lot, but it doesn't feel like it in the same ways.
Yeah, I 100% can resonate with that. So, I want to dive more into that whole concept. But first, let's get through baby number 3, 8 weeks. What was going on there?
So I was transitioning between companies. The company that I was working for when I first got pregnant with my third was just not exactly the company I wanted to be working for. There were some things that had shifted during my pregnancy that just weren't going to be feasible, both with pay structure and also just the way they had the position kind of laid out. And so for me, it made more sense to look for a job elsewhere. I found a job and I had to be fully transparent of I'm taking leave. If you're not willing to hire me, that's fine, but I'm taking leave because I'm due in November or what have you. And they were very supportive. In fact, this company was just incredible. They sent me flowers, they were, checked in on me. It was just very supportive environment. It was the perfect environment going into baby number 3. But I kind of limited myself to 8 weeks because I was scared of will they actually hold this position for me? Will I actually, have a place to work after she's born? And to some degree, we also agreed upon that in my contract when I signed with them of, okay, I'll take 8 weeks after she's born, or I'll start at this date. And it ended up being right around 8 weeks leave.
So, you had to navigate the interview process currently expecting, and we're transparent about that. And wow.
Yes. So actually, I've done that twice. So with my second as well, I was about 3 or 4 months pregnant and had to interview at a different job and they ended up hiring me. I wore a baggy dress because I didn't want there to be any sort of question, because even if companies can't necessarily directly tell you they're not hiring because you're pregnant, they can find ways, right? And so I didn't even want to have that on the docket. And so I wore a baggy dress to my interview. After I got hired, after I was on staff, I told the supervisor, hey, I'm due this date. And it ended up not being a big deal. You have to be cautious. You have to protect your family. And, that's not my first rodeo.
It's, like, intimidating, I feel like. I'm like, "I am proud of you." Like, that's cool.
It is very, yeah, it was very intimidating. And honestly, even telling the supervisors, so I was offered the position in both places before I told them that I was pregnant.
Okay.
And even in having that, it was a very intimidating conversation to have with the supervisors of, hey, I know you just hired me, and I know I'm not going to really get any sort of paid leave, but this is what I've got to do. And then to navigate that process of, I don't have enough vacation days saved up because I was just getting hired in. FMLA doesn't take effect, right? And so I
Mhm.
really had to kind of piecemeal things together of, is this the right decision for our family? How do I make this leave work? Can I go back right away, or do I just take the hit and get fired kind of thing? And so thankfully I have found places that have been very supportive, but I know that's not always the case. I do kind of attribute a lot of that to my therapy field, right? Like we for the most part are very understanding and like expect humans to be humans, right? But I know that's not always the case, especially when you go to like corporate America or you're an entrepreneur or any of those sorts of things, right?
Yeah, that's super interesting when you take a look at the trends from, like, an industry perspective. It varies greatly. So, that's wonderful to hear that the therapy world, it makes a heck of a lot of sense, of course, but yeah, wonderful to hear. Okay, so I wanna dive into the comments you made around identity shift and your worthiness was productivity and this whole kind of transformation that I'm hearing you went through, because I think a lot of us can relate to the, like, you go to school, you go to college, you maybe get your master's or a higher ed degree, and you get a job and you work up the chain and you just do what you're supposed to do and grind, grind, grind and work, work, work. And I think there's a lot of us that have just been like pushed into that funnel. How for you did you, like, come to that realization that maybe that mindset wasn't serving you in motherhood?
That's a really complicated question because I really do. I mean, I know I owe a lot to my therapy background, but I really do attribute a lot of that to my therapy background in the sense of some of the same theories and, practices and things like that that I teach my clients. I had to use on myself in the sense of like the mental shifts and the sense of like how this aspect of me really represented a lot of other deeper, vaguer sort of things and feelings about just in general, like what I was experiencing, right? A lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of fear, uncertainty, and powerlessness, right? Like all of that was being represented in how much I could get done. And so when I started to pull back the layers of what's actually underneath this identity, what's actually underneath this need to be productive and all of that, that's when I found kind of myself and also just did a lot of healing in general. So a lot of that I do attribute to my own therapy background as well as like my experiences in therapy. I've had a lot of, supervisors, supervision, therapy, personally that's just helped me to come to that place as well. And then another thing was just kind of reaching out to support and talking it through, because when you're allowed to kind of just spiral in your head of all of these nasty things you believe about yourself, they get bigger and scarier and uglier. And it's not until you really get them out in the open and kind of release the chains of shame that you're actually able to get a good perspective on them. Right. So, talking with my husband in particular, of, do you think any less of me because I'm staying at home? I remember there were times he'd come home from work and he never asked me of this. My husband is probably one of the most incredible men I've ever met. And he'd never ask me, like, what did you do today? I'd give him this list of, hey, I did all of these things. Like, look, I'm doing something. And he'd be like, okay, cool. That's great. Like, thanks. But I don't expect that of you. but for me it was like I had to prove myself, right? And so being able to talk to him with this stuff of like, I feel like I have to prove myself. I feel like I have to match you in your work in some way because I don't have a dollar amount behind what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then having friends too, even though I was the first of my friend group to have kids, and actually they were a lot of my trigger in some regards because they were in the grind. They were hustling. They were in very demanding fields. And so when I talked to them, they'd be like, "Oh, I have this work project due. Oh, I have this done." And I'm like, "I changed 4 diapers today. Like, congrats to me." So while they say it now and they're like, we have so much respect for you. We really appreciate you. It didn't feel like it in the moment. And so in some ways they were triggering. In some ways it was just kind of this mirror that I needed to look into.
That's super interesting and super insightful stuff, and I can really hear that, your background as a therapist has really influenced this evolution that you've personally had. So, were there any particular challenges that you faced as a working mom, and how did you overcome those as you were getting back into work each time after each kid?
It felt like I was starting over every single time because there were peers of mine that were my age or had graduated similarly that were steps ahead. Like they were in supervisor roles, and here I am, an associate licensed clinician, which is like the lowest on the totem pole in so many ways, other than an intern. And so it felt like every single time I had a kid, I was starting over, which was really challenging for so many reasons. One, because I had a family to support, and when you're lowest on the totem pole, that doesn't really leave a lot of opportunity to support your family. And it was very defeating in some ways because it felt like I was never going to climb the totem pole. We thought we were done after two. Baby number three came as kind of a surprise to some degree. And so it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm never going to get off this treadmill. I'm never going to get off this. And as much as I wanted a big family, I wanted a lot of kids, it was kind of hard to mesh those worlds because the world is not set up for you to have lots of kids, for you to take that time off. The world is not set up to support moms.
Yeah, talk to me more about that. Give some examples of how you feel like it's not set up. I agree, but I'd love to hear
Yeah.
what comes to mind for you.
I mean, I think of the childcare alone, right? Like trying to find childcare. So, for example, right now, my husband he just started as a firefighter, which doesn't allow much time. He doesn't get to take days off. Like he is on his shift, and that is that. And so, with that comes, okay, the kids are sick. I take the hit. If the childcare is late, I take the hit. Like I have to adjust my whole schedule. And my husband is incredibly supportive, and so I feel very blessed in that. And also, I have had to rearrange my entire life and my entire schedule in ways that I don't feel that a lot of the times, my husband or others have to, right? Those without kids don't have to arrange their schedule. And I feel like I'm about to digress a little bit, but I feel like a lot of times moms and women are not comfortable coming forward about that feeling because they're penalized for it. It's, well, you chose to have kids. Okay, yes, you chose to have kids, but you didn't know what you didn't know. I'm 3 kids deep and I still don't know what I'm doing most of the time. Every time is different. Every time, I mean, you've never done this before. You've never parented before. Even if you have 3 kids, you've never parented 3 kids before, right? And so you didn't know what you were signing up for. And so you're kind of learning by fire here and just doing the best that you can. And so the world isn't set up for moms in so many ways because childcare isn't accessible. It's not affordable. You're getting mommy tracked in some ways with your career and expected to still make up that difference in pay. I personally feel the tug when I'm at work, guilt for enjoying the work I do and then not enjoying as much time with my kids, or when I'm with my kids that I should be working, right? So it's this constant tug of war of it's never enough. It never feels enough. Whatever you're doing, it doesn't feel enough. And you're supposed to work like you don't have kids and parent like you don't have work, right? And so this just feels like a lose lose situation in so many ways. And especially if you turn to social media and other media sources in general that says, this is what you should be doing. This is where your kids should be. This is, if you're not, enrolled in 5 different activities or in this school system, then you've already, set them up for failure. You might as well quit now, kind of thing. And for me, one of my big motivators in the work that I do with moms in particular is this idea of like, release all that nonsense, release all the BS here and just go back to you. Just like take a breath and slow down and really look at what's important. And that was the big part of my work for me, is that when I start to get in that spiral of I'm not doing enough, I'm behind, really kind of going back to what is important to me. What matters to me.
Yeah, that's great. That was gonna be my question. It's like, agreed, it feels like it's set up for a lose-lose here. You're never doing enough either with work or your family, and so, is there a way to make it a win-win? Like, I don't know. But what I'm hearing from you is it's like it's an internal mindset thing maybe that feels like that has been helpful for you?
Yeah, it really has been the internal work, because all of that other stuff is just, it's just the like glam. It's just the ornaments you're putting on, right? It's the thing that's easy to focus on. For a lot of my clients, I give this triangle representation here where the tip of the triangle is like the presenting issue. Like, oh, I'm not spending enough time with my kids. Oh, I'm behind in work. But those are just those easy grabs. But what's really going on is this idea of like uncertainty, powerlessness, worthlessness, those sorts of deeper rooted feelings of, am I enough? Do I matter? Do you see me? Kind of thing. And I feel like motherhood really brings that to surface, because not only is it you, but now you have this other human that you're keeping alive, that you're helping to thrive, that you want to have do better than you, right? And kids have a way of triggering us in ways that we never expected. Not only because they bring up stuff that we thought we had put to rest, but also stuff we never even knew existed. And so a lot of the ways that you're parenting your kids, you're parenting yourself, you're learning everything, and so you're kind of walking side by side in this journey in a different way.
Yeah, it truly is incredible and hard and all of the things all at once. It's wild. So tell me about as you look back on the last 5 years of being a mom, do you feel like there's certain markers for you of, I feel like I was in the thick of it, and then I feel like I had my shit together, and then I feel like I was in the thick of it again? Like, is it a roller coaster for you as you look back on it? Is it kind of one steady uphill climb? Like, talk to me, like, where's your mind go when you think about the last 5 years for you?
I would say it's probably a roller coaster, but I don't perceive it that way. And what I mean by that is, when you're in it, you don't realize you're in it, right? When you're struggling and hashing it out, you forget that any other world exists in some regards, right? Like, it can feel like, and at least for me, and I'll only speak for me, it can feel like I am doing what everybody else is doing, right? Even if they don't have the same number of kids, or even if they don't have the same career or what have you, it can feel like, well, everybody has to be doing this, right? Like, I'm not special. And honestly, it's taken a lot of reminders from outside sources of like, you realize you're in the thick of it, right? Like, you realize you've got a lot going on right now, and it's okay to take a breath, because this is just my norm, right? I know no different than 3 kids. I know no different than, you know, having the lifestyle we have. Yes, I remember to an extent having 1 kid, but when I had 1 kid, it was hard. And it was hard for different reasons, because it was all new. Everything was new, and we were in poverty, and there were so many other elements that were challenging in their own way. And then you add a second kid. Okay, well, that was hard too, but that was because we were in a pandemic, and I'd never had 2 kids before, right? So every level has its own hard, and you're just kind of hashing it out, and you don't really, at least for me, know any different. And in recognizing that my heart is, it's not comparable to somebody else's heart. I'm on my own journey. I had a friend once in grad school tell me, because she was a mom doing grad school, like in the thick of it, motherhood, doing grad school. And she was like, you have to measure yourself by your own ruler. Because I was telling her, like, I don't have it that bad. Like, I don't even have kids and I'm trying to get this paper done. And she was like, but you're still trying to get a paper done and that's hard for you. And she was like, my level of hard is different than your level of hard, but that doesn't mean that one's worse or better than the other. And so, like, for all the moms, right? Like, we have to measure ourselves by our own ruler. Like, it's hard for you because you have one kid and this is all new. And it's hard for me because I have three kids and I don't know what the heck I'm doing most of the time. But we're all like, it's all hard and it's okay that it's hard and it's not going to be hard forever. And it's just kind of finding those little spouts of joy throughout your day.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That is just such a wonderful, I think, mindset to have. And the only thing I feel like I'd add there is like this too shall pass. Like you said, those stages change quickly, and so it feels like you're to some degree you're constantly like having a new challenge, but also like that means like the challenge that you're handling right now will be gone in a little bit, and so there's like a certain balance to it, I guess.
And not forgetting to look back too, right? Like so often we're so focused on like what's next, what's next, what's next, or even in the struggle of like what's right now. But like looking back of like how far you've come, right? Because that can be so beneficial in giving you that little push of encouragement, giving you that like I've done this before. I've done hard things and I can make it through. And so I really do encourage like instead of looking ahead of like all you still have to do, looking behind and seeing how far you've come already.
Yeah, my son's birthday is coming up. He's gonna be 1 years old, and I'm like, I'm so, like, I can't believe he's one, but also like, I can't believe I've kept a baby like alive for 1 year. Like, what a tremendous year of growth for me and my husband, and like that is like a milestone for everybody involved in the family. So,
That's a huge milestone. Like that first year of parenting, right? Like everything was new. That was a full, level of first. So absolutely, that's a huge celebration. I'm excited for you.
oh, thank you. You're so sweet. All right. Well, so thank you again so much for joining us. Is there anything you want to share with some moms that might be in the thick of it, might be maybe debating another kid is something that we commonly hear, and whether they, I think, can afford it or not, or whether they can make it work? Like anything from your experience being a mom of three kids, all under the age of 5?
Yes. So one would be like you're never gonna feel like you're ready. I mean, not once have I felt like I was ready for kids, and yet you still do it. And I would can't imagine my life without my kids, right? So that would be one piece is like you're never gonna feel ready to do it. And then the other thing that I'm a huge advocate for, and I know how hard this can be as a one as a mom, but two as like a person who is just very much an achiever, a perfectionist, those sorts of things is like don't hesitate to reach out for help. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean that you're any less to need that help. And honestly, like you're not going to feel like doing it. You may want the help, you may need the help. You're not going to feel like asking for that help, but do it anyway because it doesn't have to be so hard.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Alexis. Again, so wonderful having you and your perspective join us today on Moms with Benefits. So, if folks want to follow you and follow your work, where can they find you?
So they can find me. I'm mostly on Instagram at Confidently Mommy. And that will be, I share a lot of tips and support. And if you're interested in additional support too, I offer some coaching. So that's the best place to connect with me.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
If you are currently expecting or just looking to plan ahead, check out perkyleave.com to learn more about your leave benefits. Moms with Benefits is chasing financial and emotional stability for motherhood. If you've resonated with any of the stories from our moms, we'd love for you to give us a rating and quick review to help spread the word. You'll also find Moms with Benefits on Instagram at momswithbenefits.org. Keep going and keep growing, Mama.